All righty. I want to welcome you for the first time or back again to Marijuana Monthlies. I am your host, Chelsea Higgs Wise, and I'm the co founder and executive director of Marijuana Justice. Welcome to our space where we center humanity and believe that cops, prosecutors, and judges will always use the justice system with more aggression and bias against Black and Brown people. This is a reality in the Commonwealth and the country, and as we are seeing all across the globe. We have been very busy in the last month since February's Marijuana Monthly. And in case you missed it, we have been building power for pressure. That means day one equity. And day one equity means that on day one of open cannabis sales in Virginia, there are no new crimes. We are actively or completed the resentencing and expungement of people's records with marijuana related offenses, and that social equity operators are funded and also ready to open their doors. That is day one equity. Now, as you all may have heard, the adult use sales bill was continued until 2023. And resentencing is a separate bill and is technically still alive, but I'm here to kind of report right now that it has been shifted to a study bill and has not much hope of survival. So a little reminder that legalization of simple possession last year was the legislative person-centered approach to decreasing the disproportionate penalizing of Black, Latinx, and Indigenous residents here in Virginia that was still happening after 2020 decriminalization. So with Virginia now being a legal state for possession, the idea of early sales coming up was no surprise. But what we immediately opposed was the exclusive and limited market that was being proposed for medical operators and would essentially kill, the built-in head start for social equity operators that was passed last year. Not to mention, it would delete worker protections that were also passed in 2021. So not only did this exclusive and inaccessible market scare us all for small operators, but we were terrified by the local option for legalization written in the bill. That's right. The bill this year said that localities could have voted in November if they wanted legal sales or not in their area. That's right. So now picture for a moment this kind of marijuana movie plot with me, y'all. September 2022, Virginia starts early sales with conservative municipalities across Virginia organizing against these sales expanding. And they use a referendum to ban local legalization in November. Now, after this November vote, people are worrying about the scattered prohibition zones now across Virginia and the chance to ever stop momentum of these cannabis oligopolies now seem real bleak, especially for small local operators, small farmers, and cannabis enthusiasts that will never be able to benefit from the Commonwealth's commercialization of cannabis, especially those hurt by the fake war on drugs. So now in these prohibition areas, residents are devastated at the lack of access and legal cannabis. And if they do have access, they're now outpriced because of the legal monopoly of medical operators who don't have to make it affordable. Now, with no competition, the prices for cannabis in Virginia soar, and the legacy market remains to be the go-to for many people in Virginia. The people start to feel the sudden enforcement of marijuana. They feel it increase. More police in their neighborhoods, and all because of these big dollars that the bill funded commercial cannabis, but it also funded more cops. That's how the Virginia institution reactivate the war on drugs. End scene. So yeah, that could have happened, y'all. But that's what we paused for another year by continuing the fight for next year. We want equitable legalization. We want day one equity. We want no new crimes. Now, because the game of politics always equals a lose-lose situation for the people, there were some opportunities where we could have achieved relief from law enforcement on things like home cultivation. But sadly, y'all, those decreased penalties were tied into the business bill with no motivation by legislators nor cannabis lobbyists to protect the people if they can't also collect their profit. So now the bill now that the bill didn't pass, what will Virginia look like? Well, the answer is exactly how it has felt and looked since July 1 of 2021. Last year, many law enforcement and even prosecutors were saying that marijuana was not their priority. In fact, when we passed last year, it was a major talking point by legislators. So now, why in the world would cops be on us? Well, y'all, it's not because we won't have a big fancy dispensary. It's because our decision makers are giving the marching orders to organize a recriminalization of our communities. So if people are upset that the bill didn't pass and are truly worried about the law enforcement of cannabis due to the small portions of this big bill not passing, those portions that offer some protections, if you're worried about those, then it's time to divest from police resources that allow them to patrol us for weed. Or other ways to protect yourself. If you're comfortable talking directly to carceral actors, you can reach out to your Commonwealth attorney or police and ask them how they're treating cannabis in your local area. There are definitely particulars, and we are here to remind everyone that until cannabis prohibition is repealed completely, in our world of abolition, these penalties will always be felt greater, but with a greater impact on us. So if you have more questions about the nuances of the bill, what passed, what didn't, how you're impacted, make sure you're subscribed to our email list, and we'll be updating our report outs that way. And you can also email us questions at info@marijuanajustice.org. So don't forget, GA is still happening, and it's important that everyone is staying up to date and organized. We're going to transition really quickly to our special guest. I just want to take a moment to give myself a water break because this next speaker and our guest for tonight really does deserve our attention. And I'm going to make sure I read her bio because it is important work that we have. So tonight, I'm really excited to welcome to Marijuana Monthly the founder of National Cannabis Festival, an executive board member and deputy director of Supernova, Ms. Carolyn Phillips. She specializes in conceptualizing, strategizing, and executing political campaigns, nonprofit initiatives, live events, and marketing experiences. In 2014, Caroline opened the High Street LLC, a public relations and event production with the mission of cultivating projects and ideas that leverage business and advocacy for social good. In 2016, Caroline launched the National Cannabis Festival. That's right, the NCF in Washington, D.C., just right up the road. And in 2018, she expanded the program to include the National Cannabis Policy Summit and 420 Month. Going into year 6, I think, I'm not sure what year we are here, but NCF is now the largest ticketed cannabis gathering on the East Coast. NCPS is the only national televised cannabis conference in the U.S., and she is a native Washingtonian. She received her bachelor's from Wake Forest University and completed her postgrad at Howard, and received her master's from Georgetown University. I'd love to welcome you all to the stage, Ms. Carolyn Phillips.
Hi, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. We know that this is your first time here, but we're really excited to have you and talk a little bit about your experience and hear from you. So first off, can you tell us a little bit about your work with Supernova Women and maybe walk us a little bit of your priorities in the cannabis space?
Absolutely. So I am the deputy director and also on the executive board for Supernova Women. And Supernova Women is an organization made up of Black and brown women, and we work to empower Black and brown people to be stakeholders in the cannabis economy. And we do that through educational programming, through grant distribution, through continued professional support for people who are owner-operators. And we also convene networking events so that Black and brown people in cannabis can build stronger networks and work together towards their goals.
Sounds good. Well, those are the words we love to hear. So tell us a little bit about what you all have been working on since inception, right? What are some of the big things that you really prioritized?
Supernova's work since its inception has been far-ranging and deeply impactful. Amber Center, Nina Parks, and Sunshine Lencho started Supernova Women in 2015 in the Bay Area. And at the time, there were no organizations like Supernova representing people both on the community level, but then using that work to amplify the message on the national level that social equity programs need attention. So at the time, Supernova Women helped to architect and then implement the first social equity programs in the Oakland area. In the years since, we have worked on tax reform to try and ease some of the oppressive tax issues that are facing California operators. We have also worked on creating workforce development programs that actually pay folks to learn how to get careers in cannabis. And now we're working with organizers or with companies like Weedmaps to create workforce development programs for owner operators so that they can sustain and grow their businesses down the line.
Now, these workforce programs, sometimes they kind of get a bad rap, but talk a little bit about the importance of it, particularly in the cannabis space.
I think that workforce development programs to be impactful need to be extremely comprehensive. So our program is being led by a professor, Veronica Rebello. She comes to us from the University of San Francisco, where she is specialized in creating these kinds of programs. So she's almost a third-party set of eyes who's been able to look over the work that we've done in the past couple of years and really help improve it. So she's approaching this from a very academic standpoint and really making sure that our program has a start, a middle, and a finish, and that when you walk away, you can answer questions like, what did you learn from the Supernova program? So that's step one. We're actually starting to develop materials around the program that we can hand to students. So when they walk away, they have notebooks to look back on.
Wow.
Things like that. But our workforce development programs are different. We're not just bringing in advisors and experts. We are the owner operators.
Right.
In fact, I think I'm the one member of the Supernova board that's not on the plant touching side of the business, where I can offer advice and information on marketing and getting your brand out there. Amber, Issa, Raven, Whitney, Hope, and the rest of the board can actually tell you what it's like to open and start a plant touching business.
Wow. You're dropping some real gems. So I want to encourage our support, Evan, who's back there running things. We want to make sure we drop all of your links and things so people can follow these great names and these other board members at Supernova. And I also just hear that you all are making real materials for people to use with the conscious effort that our folks need something different because number one, you're in the business, you're in the community, and now you're creating this for us as well. You may not know, but some folks have heard me talk a little bit before, but I'm a ex-social worker and have done been interacted with some of these workforce programs. And sometimes it's just really encouraging to hear someone when we hear how you all are creating these programs, what intention it has. And anybody listening in Virginia, take some notes or listen and return back to these videos because as you're talking to regulators and legislators, these are the types of things we want out of our workforce, right? And I know that many of your members have already talked to appointees right here in Virginia and informed some of our legislators. So speaking about Supernova and speaking about cannabis is really like speaking about just that national best standard that we're really all hoping for in the ever-changing world, right? The really ever-changing world of cannabis. So I know that your organization just put out a report. And for a moment, I just want to say how excited I get as a local organizer when I see groups like you all putting out reports. As someone that started just a few years ago in cannabis organizing specifically outside of racial justice and other things, I was looking for the materials, right? Like, where do I go and all of the things. And it was like pulling pieces together, to be really honest, for a lot of us, right? And it's why it's so important that groups are putting out these comprehensive reports and asking really important questions that we can now take back, ask the same questions or put the reports to our legislators. So I'll talk about the report that you all put together, maybe a little bit about what motivated you all for that. And then, of course, what you found.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words about the report. We're really excited about it. But the Supernova Social Equity Impact Report, the idea for it was born early last year when we realized that as organizers and advocates, we all talk in sweeping generalizations at times about big ideas for social equity programs and, you know, a general blueprint for social equity programs. And here are some ideas that should work in every city. but rarely were we able to actually attach numbers that talked about how these programs would impact the economy in our communities. And I think that while we're able to appeal to certain politicians on sort of social and civil rights fronts, there are others who really just want to hear about the dollars and cents. So we needed to provide another tool. The other thing that we know now as organizers and advocates over the years is that data and proof, unfortunately, costs a lot of money. So, it's wild and it's unfortunate. And that's actually one of the big access to or the big barriers to advocacy for a lot of organizers. How do we prove our point? How do we make people believe us? We can't afford to show you. So we were really proud last year to be in a position to be able to hire this third party analysis group to come in and do this program for us. So they ran an analysis every year.
Can we take a quick moment to stop on that point? I think it's really important for folks to hear just the resource issue that you're just talking about right now, to be able to provide the proof of what you need, even in your own area, much less for folks to be able to model off of, right? As an organizer, I'm often looking for things like model ordinances, right? And things like that, and model programs. And if groups like Supernova were still really struggling for the type of resources to pull this data together, we have to understand what local organizers and things are also struggling with. So, and again, when we're hearing messages from big actors and where you may not be hearing messages from other folks, it's not because we don't have the messages, is that we may not have the resources to reach you.
Exactly. I mean, reports like this, they cost a lot of money because when you bring in these analysis firms, they're not just pulling information from the cannabis industry and spitting out numbers. They're aggregating information from past reports from all other industries. So it's their intelligence and their information too that they're dumping in. And that's sometimes what you're getting charged for.
Exactly.
But we found a great partner in Ecotone Analytics. And for 1 year, they scraped all the data they could from the cannabis industry. They interviewed regulators running programs around the country. They interviewed the Supernova board. They did comparisons on overlapping issues in other industries to help us pull together a report that will hopefully be a tool for advocates, because that's what we wanted to make, to walk into rooms with legislators and say, I can show you how much a well-run program can bring back into our community. And I think that we've gotten a couple of steps closer to really accomplishing that. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are places in the report that we want to tighten up, and there are questions that we still want to answer to help make the report sharper. But at least we have a barometer and sort of a starting point now, and hopefully we've given people something to work with.
Well, let me answer that last question about giving people something to work with. I think your report came out February 4th, and we had a graphic ready, I think by the 5th or that Monday, because it was a Thursday. And it was that important to not just have the information available, but literally if you go to THC Justice Instagram, you can see a few slides, and it's just a screenshot of their report of a certain slide that shows the type of impact from social equity operators in communities. So just really quickly, what was, I know I have a big talking point, but what is maybe the one talking point out for advocates that you are really excited about from this report?
I mean, I think one powerful number that we can all walk around with is $1.20.
Right.
For every dollar invested in a social equity program or operator, you can expect a $1.20 return.
Yep.
So, I think that we see through this report that the impact is going to come to communities in tax revenue. Mm-hmm. It's going to come to communities in people developing assets and individual wealth that then gets reinvested back in their community. And then it's going to come in community reinvestments. We're going to have dollars to actually put back into community programs.
Exactly. And that is the benefit of having folks that are invested in the community and tied in the community, growing with the community. I mean, it's literally the connection that we need, and why folks coming in from the outside to kind of disturbing that ecosystem is part of the big problem, right? We have to make space for us. I see a lot of people dropping comments really supporting what we're talking about. If you do have questions, don't be shy. Please drop them in. We'll get to them as we can, and definitely at the end, if there are any questions. So definitely make sure that you are checking out that report. And like I said, it was I don't even know what day it is. We are in the middle of session. Sometimes my brain gets a little fried. It is the second day of March. So it was just a month ago with the report. And, so that shows you how quickly things are changing in session for us, because just a month ago, I was able to use that slide and talk about, the hopes of what we wanted and the benefits of social equity. And today, we're really reporting and talking this week about marijuana proposal being continued to next year. So we, and I kind of said in the beginning, if you're just tuning in, you have heard the news that because we have a different landscape right here in Virginia, the House is now Republican. We have a Republican governor. Last year it was fully Dems. These are different dynamics, y'all. And so it just kind of seems like there was a halt with the proposal for legal sales. Now, and I'm kind of saying that, and folks are like, well, you're agreeing with the Republicans. I'm not agreeing with Republicans' motives at all. It's that the idea that we want to build the better bill, definitely. And so, as I kind of mentioned before, I really want to ask you kind of a hypothetical of, because we did propose the early sales, allowing the medical operators to perhaps hemp operators to have this exclusive head start, legislating a limited and inaccessible market. The proposal also included the local option that should ban the parts. I mentioned this in the beginning. If it had passed, what is kind of your predictions on what it would come in Virginia, particularly because you're right up in DC too? I really want to mention that, particularly folks at Nova understand that DMV area, what happens legally kind of affects us all. So
right.
What would have been your prediction, just being in the cannabis industry?
I think it's interesting. I guess I'd like to say welcome to the club, Virginia. You now join DC in this bizarre limbo.
Right.
Ours is caused by, of course, congressional control over our budget and how the laws in our city are implemented. But for you, legislative holdups.
Right.
Regardless, I've been trying to really turn advocates in DC to look at the bright side as we've been sitting here in our limbo going on year 7. So for folks who don't know, Washington, D.C. passed Initiative 71, which very similar to Virginia, it allowed adults to possess cannabis. In D.C., it's up to 2 ounces for personal use and 2 for giving to a friend. It allowed people to get cannabis from medical dispensaries. It allowed home cultivation, and it allowed gifting. But what it didn't allow was recreational sales. And it left this interesting gifting loophole that, because of a lot of the issues facing the medical market, whether it's tax code 280E, putting undue burden on these business owners, whether it's plant grow limits or limitations in how they're allowed to dispense the medicine, all of those holdups and kind of the slowdown of the medical market at the same time as this loophole existing and the limited number of licenses being available to the number of people that wanted to gain access to them, created this vibrant unlicensed market. And so these are folks that I believe want to become licensed business owners if they could find a way and if the conditions weren't terrible. And they operate spaces in DC where they sell goods, perhaps t-shirts or artwork, things like that. And you can get cannabis gifts. I believe that a lot of that's starting to happen now in Virginia. I think that's accurate, that there's sort of this sort of back and forth between aspiring business owners and current licensees.
Yeah, people are getting creative in all sorts of ways. Virginia, when we did kind of had this moment, they did some things with sharing. There could be no other exchange of other goods with the sharing, trying to prevent what happened in DC in Virginia. But what you're saying is people are getting creative in Virginia since July because they feel less penalties to have it. So there's more of a demand and it's happening.
Well, and the hard part is, I think this has been hard for me to see in DC. I don't think anybody has bad intentions at all in this. I really want to think that. I would also like to think that nobody wants to see any more people going to jail for weed. So I think that's one bottom line that I hope everybody in our industry can agree on. What I hate that I'm seeing right now, especially in the DC area, is this kind of pitting of licensed against unlicensed. So people who want to gain access to people who currently have access in a really subpar marketplace. Like, let's admit it. If you are holding a license right now, and let's say you're not someone from a larger, like, multi-state operator, but you're holding a license and you've paid the dollars and you've gone through the holding on to the real estate and you've gone through all of the red tape, and suddenly the marketplace is not what you thought it was going to be, but the folks down the street also wanted a license. They couldn't get one at all. Right. However, like, they are able to do something. Like, you can see how the back and forth could be maddening. You have folks on one side who are like, well, we never even had a shot.
Right.
And folks on the other side who are like, well, we took a shot, but now we're just here holding the bag.
Yeah.
And, it's legislative holdups, and that's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really appreciate you talking about that, pitting folks against each other. And that seems really unfair. And what do you think the big idea answer would be? I think we were all kind of talking about it, but in your mind, what could DC or should DC look like?
I would like to see, it's really hard. So many people have so much at stake, yeah. Livelihoods, years of work they've put into creating businesses, years of work they've put into licenses years ago that promised something that hasn't been fulfilled.
Yeah.
I hope that everybody can take a more compassionate approach here, which is really hard to talk about in business.
Say it here. So
I'd also like folks to get much more creative. And I think there's going to have to be some give and take.
Yeah.
People in the unlicensed space trying to gain access, while we're waiting for better conditions, which I hope in DC are coming soon, learn about what life in the licensed space is going to look like. If you don't like what you see, help current licensees advocate for better conditions, because those will ultimately impact you.
Right.
And perhaps lining up together on the issues we do overlap on could lead to some progress altogether on agreeing to some things down the line.
Wow.
Again, to the current licensees, there are going to have to be concessions made. And I think that for those folks need to recognize the privilege of even being able to gain access to a license so early.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that, hopefully if we can all work a little bit more together and get this conversation, like right now, out in the open, we can get better solutions.
It's really true. And I'll give a little insight on Virginia politics here, as before the bill died last week. Again, time is so fun around here. There was conversations, and there are many conversations, y'all, but there was a conversation, Caroline, and it was about allowing the micro businesses to start early, but not the social equity folks, as they were trying to compromise. And then what I saw in the organizing groups, and it kind of experienced as someone that I try and fight people-centered. And what I saw happen was the split between those that wanted the micro businesses and co-ops and those that would qualify for social equity. Many folks in the co-op spaces do not meet some of these qualifiers of social equity, right? So then there became this split. And even though there was never honestly a chance for a bill to pass, the House never really intended it, just for a few days while that possibility was on the table, there was this split between a lot of Black and brown organizers about the opportunity for one of them to be involved, so that there could be called a win to say that they included small businesses and that sort of thing. So I think, like you said, the more that we have this conversation, the more that we can be prepared for that type of playbook, because it's coming, right? It's definitely coming. It's here, I guess.
It is here. But most of all, I really need everyone to remember that we can't walk around with bumper stickers and t-shirts saying, don't put people in jail for weed, but then still somehow be supporting enforcement against people for weed. And I know that's really hard to talk about, but it's a thing that we have to face.
I would love for you to say that again, but we are recorded, so we can run it back. But it's exactly right. And I think that's really our bottom line. And when we legislation happens so fast, right? And these moments are going on. And so when these opportunities and proposals come up, we go, uh, who's the most impacted group here, and will this provide another pathway for people to prison, right? Like, that's the question. And even when it involves business, there's always an impact report statement attached to that bill that says how much money they're going to put into law enforcement as well. A lot of in Virginia, we like revamped the drug recognition experts and put $1 million specifically last year into training cops to be DREs all over the Commonwealth. And so that's kind of the question we always come back to: is this proposal creating more barriers and creating more pathways to prison? So thank you so much for saying that. But yeah, a lot of conversations that we have to have out loud. You kind of touched a little bit on my next question, which is the criminal justice piece. What have been any conversations that you've been part of, or DC, just about the expungement or resentencing conversations, or just the criminal justice piece as an operator in the space?
So in the DC area, it's been really promising to see that all of the legislation presented recently by council members and the mayor's legislation presented in the fall of 2020. It's all a bit of a time warp right now. But everything that we've basically been sitting on and waiting to be able to put into law once the Harris rider is hopefully lifted and we can start to shape our adult use market, has included expungement. It has included finding ways for folks with prior convictions to get jobs in the legal cannabis industry. So I think that's all really promising. That does make me happy. However, we do still face some of the things that folks in Virginia are facing as far as questions around our adult use program. I know in legislation that was presented by the mayor, there was an idea in there that we would give current licensees 2 years jumpstart on additional license types in Washington, D.C. Now, on one hand, you're like, 2 years, that's so much time. That means we won't have new licensees in place for at least another 3. But then you also think again about the perspective of the folks who have licenses right now who haven't been able to do much with them. It's like, well, maybe that's, some way to kind of repay them a little bit. But there has to be a happy medium. It can't be one or the other. So I'm hoping that our delay, and maybe this is something for Virginia advocates to think about, that our delay is giving us just a bit more time to think about what we want our legislation to look like, to look at places like Oakland, to look at Illinois, to look at what's going on in New Jersey and New York and see what works and what doesn't work, and to maybe get ours right the first time. So as you were saying at the top of the show, I think that might be the silver lining that you guys have right now with your delay for a year. You're really going to get to focus on what works, what doesn't work, and how that's applicable in Virginia.
And, Carolyn, girl, that was the point of the delay. Yeah. That was the point of when they said that in the first place. And, I feel really grateful, and I'm just really continuing to learn from places like Oakland, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, just the places that you named. And also realizing the conversations we're having is that we're a little bit more Southern, right? We might have a little bit different conversation with our legislators, but it is important to gather the information. I've learned so much, y'all, from advocates across the country. I mean, I would not be here if it wasn't for these organizations led particularly by women of color. I was thinking today, I think I can name one org that's not a woman of color org that has just like really poured into me, whether they know it or not, to be honest. And so it's really important that we continue to learn from each other. And New Jersey, New York, they passed the same time we did last year. They're having a lot of the same conversations we are, and we have to keep up. So people have heard me talk a little bit, Caroline, in 2020, we put out a JLARC report. It's like a report down here that our legislative body will commission. And we were really part of making sure that came alive. But I tell people now, I was a champion of some of that information, but it's 2022 now. In the cannabis world, that information is old.
Yep.
That's old information. Yeah, times are changing. And before we move on to the fun stuff, I want to just kind of mention about the criminal justice here in Virginia to let folks know. Again, I said at the top of the hour, in case you came in late, resentencing is technically still alive here in Virginia. We've been told that it will probably not survive the week. They just not motivated to move past conference. And we talked a little bit about expungement. There was a lot of record sealing in the bill last year. There was a chance this year with Senator Lucas and her bill to lift the lifetime cap that would allow people to seal more than one record in their lifetime. And but that, I believe, is in the same fate as our resentencing. So unfortunately this year, it just doesn't look like they're motivated to even do some of the protections, which isn't particularly surprising, but just to update everyone there. I do see of a question I wanted to ask. Yeah, thanks so much for throwing that up. So Tamika, thanks so much for being here. I've attended the Cannabis Salon series by DSLBD. Have you heard of any outcomes from those hosted events? And Carolyn?
Yeah, so it's been exciting to see DC's Office of Small Business Development hosting cannabis salons for the past couple of months. They've been covering CBD, they've been covering licensing, they've been covering ancillary businesses, so non-plant touching businesses. I don't know necessarily what results have come of that yet, but I do hope that the folks in the Office of Small Business are taking notes from those meetings and making suggestions to the mayor's policy folks on how they shape legislation going forward. I do know that they tuned into the Supernova report presentation, so I'm excited about that. Hopefully they're taking numbers from that report and using it to make their case for how they think small businesses in the cannabis industry in DC should be treated. But, I think that's one of the biggest outcomes. They are connecting to advocates and business owners in the community, and they're being connected to our information and our tools. And hopefully that helps lead things in the right direction.
Right. And what I also heard you say is they're hosting these salons. So Tamika, other folks, just as Carolyn was saying earlier, if you have something on your mind, something that you like, you don't like, those are the places to tell and put those opinions in writing, let those people take the notes, and hopefully it can reach the decision makers in your area. So if you're in the DC area and you're interested in learning more about that, and of course, you can always tune in the Supernova and take that information down to the halls of power. Continue to drop in your questions as they come up. I thought that was just a good moment to take that before we kind of transitioned into some of the more fun, uplifting conversation around National Cannabis Festival. You're one of the founders, or you're the founder, and it's coming up really soon. So I would love to just know what inspired you to find this space, right? And just from my own experience, I found that cannabis space. It was fun as a consumer. And then I realized I was moving in that area, and it was like, wow, there's so much more to the space that we can really learn and pour into and connect with so many dope people. So tell us a little bit about the curation and the creation.
Yeah. So when cannabis was first legalized for medical and adult use possession, or not use, but possession in DC, back in 2015, I noticed that there was an influx of high-priced events that were coming to the city. And if you attended these events, by and large, you would see one kind of person, not young people, and definitely not people of color. And that's because the events were really expensive. And because of my work, I was generally at these events because I was working somehow in production, organizing the event in some way. Really rubbed me the wrong way, just understanding how the war on drugs has impacted people in our region, the DMV, seeing who's in jail and who's not. But now seeing these businesses arriving in our region with folks who are able to build business empires around them, while others are still getting persecuted for what they've been trying to make a little money on for, eons. So that frustrated me a lot. And I knew that I wanted to create an event that was going to be more accessible and more affordable for people. And the larger format helped me do that. And I also knew I wanted to create an event that gave people access to the things that you got at the conferences, the networking, the information, the tools, the keys to success, whatever it is that they promise you get through these conferences, which I think are great. I love conferences.
Me too.
And they're just not affordable for a lot of people. I also wanted to make sure that we had an event that said, this is all really cool. The cannabis industry is going to be great, but there are still a lot of problems that we're facing. So let's talk about them and find solutions. So we do a lot of that at the festival as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've been maybe before, but it's a whole big exhibitor fair. We have 5 education pavilions. We're debuting a culinary pavilion this year.
Yeah.
We have a full day
Oh.
concert with Wiz Khalifa headlining this year.
Mhm.
And a huge food court, which is bigger than I think any food festival that you'll attend.
Yes. Yes. No, it's a good time. I have been. I'm really excited and really excited to kind of give like exclusive news that marijuana justice will be popping up. So keep the lookout for that. That announcement and come see us. I'm really excited. This is an opportunity. It'll be, it's been COVID. It's a rush. So I still want to be safe, but I'm really excited to see people. So that'll be a lot of fun. Anything special that you always look forward to in the concert and in the festival? I know it's hard to choose with that being your baby, but
Well, we have a whole week of events, but one of the things that I really love is our policy summit, which takes place on Friday, the 22nd.
yep.
That event is free and open to the public. So if you're in the DC area and you want to come and hear lawmakers and really smart experts and advocates talk about cannabis policy that day, go to nationalcannabisfestival.com, look for the word summit on our menu, and you can learn about that program. It's free. I think it starts at 9 a.m. There's even a reception before. So grab a coffee, talk to some smart people, come and listen for the day. That event's very special. I think it just gives us a chance to really show off a lot of the knowledge in the DC region, but also a lot of the hard work of our advocacy partners.
Very nice. Yeah. And you said meet some cool people. I think those are my favorite parts about conferences, honestly. The gold star that you get off of that, it's really just meeting those people. Yeah. So we're getting close to the end of the hour. I really just want to kind of wrap up a little bit, but really ask you, especially just being up 95, what would you tell Virginians right now that are still really, willing to fight and wanting to fight for equitable legalization?
I would tell Virginians to pay attention to what's been happening in other states.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell them to keep the eye on the prize, which is we're not trying to recriminalize people for any reason when it comes to cannabis, and to take the tools that are being produced right now, whether it's the Supernova Social Equity Impact Report, the MCBA Social Equity Report that also came out recently. So that's Minority Cannabis Business Association. Or any of the information coming out of, the advocacy groups in the area, from Marijuana Justice to Marijuana Matters up here in DC. Like, really understand what's on the table in front of you, educate yourself, and help advocate in your region. We really have a chance not just to create another industry, but really to create a better industry and to hopefully make the cannabis industry an example for other industries going forward.
Exactly. That is what really got me excited and into this, is because of the idea of being able to build something new. And I've been an organizer for a long time, a social worker just in the community. And this is an opportunity to liberate people and build something for us too.
So true.
So true. And that's really why we're here. I just want to give anybody else any other moments, any time to drop any questions. This is the moment right now. I'm always a believer of giving people back their time. I know we meet here every first Wednesday of the month at 6:30. And you can find us live. You can drop in questions like I mentioned earlier. You can always email us too at info@marijuanajustice.org, y'all. I just really want to say that, General Assembly is not over. And in case you did tune in late, telling everybody, yes, it seems like we have lost the battle with cannabis this year. But unfortunately, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but we do have an opportunity to come back stronger next year. If we had passed a lot that was in that bill, it would be hard to repeal that back. And I really appreciate what Caroline said of like finding the silver lining in this, of building what we want. Definitely. So before we let you off, is there anything that I didn't ask you about, anything new that you have coming up that you want to just tell us about?
Trying to think. No, we have this big festival in DC on April 23rd. So come and check out National Cannabis Festival next month. A lot of the Supernova board members will be there speaking on different panels. So if you'd like to learn more about Supernova's work, you can meet folks at the festival or go to supernovawomen.org. Check out our Social Equity Impact Report. look in there and see how a program could impact your community, and then tell the people around you. And if you don't know what to say to a legislator, forward them the link to our report, and hopefully they'll read it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And like you said, you can also follow marijuanajustice.org. Our education page has some really specific things about resentencing, about the SURF fund, and about the legalization and social equity here in Virginia. Give some specifics as well as best practices. And I'll go ahead and say her name, Shailene Title, that's done some writing around this that we've got up there too. Some reports that you can have and really access as well. So I am really excited that we were able to have this conversation, and I'm excited for everyone joining us right now. Everyone, please enjoy the weather. If you're on this East Coast, you're probably feeling pretty good, but maybe even some allergies. But so take care. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, y'all. All right, we will catch you next month. We'll catch you on the digital world, and everyone be safe. Peace.